While Marcus Mariota's professional football career may not have gone the way many expected it to be, what you can't take away is what he did at the college football level, not just for Oregon, but for the island of Hawaii and the Polynesian community. He made breathtaking plays, led Oregon to the national championship game, and made every kid in Hawaii believe they could be the next Marcus Mariota. With Mariota recently starring on Netflix's Quarterbacks, it made me want to go down the path of nostalgia to look at how the two-star recruit from Hawaii took over the college football world and joined Oregon's Mount Rushmore of influential athletes. But before we get into this, if you enjoy college football content like this, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'm planning to release a video every day for the month of August. Also, comment who you want me to cover in future videos and who your favorite player was during the 2010s in college football. Marcus Mariota grew up on Oahu, one of the islands of Hawaii. Marcus is of Polynesian descent, which he takes pride in. Back in 2014, his high school, St. Louis School, had a book that said, "Sign in with a message to Marcus." Underneath it was a book people could share their feelings about him. When he went on to win the Heisman later that season, they packed the school auditorium to watch it on the big screen. Marcus was always a calm leader, which led to some coaches questioning whether he could play well at the college level, including his future head football coach in college. He told Bleacher Report back in 2014, "It's definitely a culture of respect. Certain traits that you kind of learn growing up. I guess you're taught as a kid. Some of which are being humble and respecting others, especially elders, being quiet, letting older people speak." He credited his parents, a Samoan father, Toa, and Hawaiian-raised mother, Alana, for instilling that in him. When Marcus arrived in St. Louis, he spent his freshman year as a second stringer on the JV team until the starter broke his hand. His JV head coach, Sion Thompson, told Bleacher Report, "Now you have to remember, Marcus is coming from Pop Warner to high school. The coaches turned around and looked at Marcus in the face and went, 'You ready?' Marcus was a deer in headlights. He didn't have his helmet on or his mouthpiece in and just stood there, shocked, so the coach put in the third stringer instead." By the time Mariota was a junior, he was sitting on the bench behind All-State quarterback Jeremy Higgins. Mariota's dad, concerned his son would never be looked at by top college coaches, started taking Marcus to different camps, including Oregon's. As a senior, he led St. Louis to an 11-1 record and to the state title while being named Prep Star Magazine All-West Regional, an Interscholastic League of Honolulu Offensive Player of the Year, as well as Hawaii's Gatorade Player of the Year. He threw for 2,597 yards, 32 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions, while also rushing for nearly 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Mariota was named to the Nuke All-World Game alongside eventual 2012 Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Manziel. He was also a track star, which translated to awards at football camps like the Fastest Man and Combine King Awards after running a 4.4840. He also helped the relay squad win the state title. Due to not starting until his senior year, and because he grew up in Hawaii, Mariota was relatively unknown when it came to the college football recruiting world. According to ESPN, he was a 2-star recruit, while 24/7 Sports Composite labeled him as a 3-star recruit. He had 2 offers, Memphis and Oregon. Oregon originally wasn't recruiting Mariota. Helfrich, then an assistant at Oregon, was scouting Higgins when he saw Mariota winning all the team's sprints. Then he saw him throw the ball. Immediately, Oregon was interested. And after Mariota went to the Ducks camp, he was offered a scholarship. After the camp, Helfrich visited Mariota in Hawaii to watch the somewhat unrecognizable quarterback practice going into the senior year. Helfrich called Chip Kelly and told him they needed to land the Hawaiian quarterback. Mariota would redshirt his freshman year and sat behind legendary Ducks quarterback Darren Thomas. Thomas had led Oregon to a national title game his first year as a starter and to the Rose Bowl during the 2011 season. He chose to forego his senior year and decided to enter the 2012 NFL Draft, where he went undrafted after throwing for 5,910 career yards and 66 career touchdowns. Mariota competed for the starting quarterback job with Brian Bennett, who many labeled as the favorite. Mariota stepped up in spring practice and played better in the spring game, completing 18 of his 26 passes for 202 yards and 1 score while adding 99 rushing yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. While Bennett completed 19 of his 32 attempts for 209 yards but did have 2 interceptions. Due to Marcus's big playability, he would earn the starting nod in the season opener against Arkansas State. He became the first freshman to start the opener for the Ducks in 22 seasons. Marcus impressed, completing 81.8% of his passes for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 57-34 win, as the announcers put an emphasis on his "ta" in his last name throughout the game, calling him Marcus Mariota. After navigating the Ducks to a win over a Derek Carr-led Fresno State team and an FCS opponent in Tennessee Tech, Oregon faced their first Pac-12 opponent against number 22 Arizona. The number 3 Ducks would roll to a 49-0 win and took their first road trip to Spokane to take on Washington State. Mariota would struggle, but the Ducks pulled away in the second half, with Kenjon Barner rushing for 195 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Oregon went into their big rivalry game against Washington as the second-ranked team in the nation, and Marcus threw for 4 touchdowns as Oregon would roll to a 52-21 win over the 23rd-ranked Huskies. A few weeks later, Marcus would have arguably his best game of the season against number 18 USC, completing 87% of his passes for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns, while also rushing for 96 yards on the ground. Barner starred as well, rushing for 321 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground, while Josh Huff had 6 receptions for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAnthony Thomas had 59 receiving yards and a touchdown himself. The Ducks won the game 62-51 in Los Angeles. Mariota followed up that performance with 377 passing yards and 6 touchdowns against Cal, where he completed nearly 80% of his passes. Oregon hosted number 14 Stanford the next week. Mariota had his worst completion percentage of the season, and the number 1 ranked Ducks would be upset in overtime 17-14. Mariota and Oregon rebounded in their rivalry game against Oregon State and earned a bid to play in their 4th straight BCS bowl game. Between Barner, Thomas's, and Mariota's magic, the Ducks would beat number 5 Kansas State 35-17. Mariota finished his first year as the starting quarterback, completing 68.5% of his passes for 2,677 yards, 32 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, while also rushing for 752 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Mariota was named Pac-12 All-Conference First Team, Pac-12 Freshman Offensive Player of the Year, and earned the 2013 Fiesta Bowl Offensive MVP Award. Going into Marcus' second year as a starter, the Ducks were expected to compete for a national title with a brand new head coach in Mark Helfrich, after Chip Kelly left for the NFL. Mariota came out firing on all cylinders, including throwing for 456 yards and 4 touchdowns against Tennessee, but he also began to show off his running ability more, rushing for over 100 yards in the first 2 games of the season. The Ducks came into the season as the 3rd-ranked team in the nation and moved up to the number 2 spot, where they spent most of the season until they took on number 6 Stanford. Marcus put up video game-esque numbers, throwing for 355 yards and 5 touchdowns, while also rushing for 2 scores against Colorado, throwing for 366 yards and accounting for 4 touchdowns against Washington, while also throwing for 327 yards and accounting for 3 touchdowns against Washington State. He completed 75% of his passes against number 12 UCLA, not throwing an interception in the first 10 games of the season. After Oregon's 8-0 start, Mariota was featured on the national cover of November 4th, 2013's issue of Sports Illustrated as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. College Game Day traveled to Stanford to watch the 2nd-ranked Ducks take on the 6th-ranked Cardinal. Stanford would win the game 26-20 as Marcus's 250 passing yards and 2 touchdowns were not enough to help the Ducks win. They rebounded, beating Utah, but got crushed by unranked Arizona and Tucson 42-16, where Marcus threw his first 2 interceptions of the season. It was the first loss to an unranked opponent since 2008 Oregon had. Marcus threw another 2 picks against Oregon State, but also threw for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns. For the first time in 5 years, Oregon would not be playing in a BCS Bowl, and instead played in the Alamo Bowl against Texas, where they went on to win 30-7. Marcus earned Pac-12 All-Conference First Team honors for the 2nd consecutive year, after setting a Pac-12 record going back to the end of the 2012 season into the 2013 season by attempting 353 passes without an interception. He threw for 3,665 yards with 31 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, while rushing for 715 yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground. His rushing numbers dropped off towards the tail end of the season, but that could be explained by his partial tear of the MCL he suffered against UCLA. He became the first Oregon player to account for over 4,000 yards in a season, with his 4,380 total yards of offense. Many wondered whether Marcus would forego his junior year to go to the NFL, but he opted to return for the 2014 season before the Alamo Bowl. Marcus entered the 2014 season as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, while also being named to a handful of award watch lists. Marcus came into the season with a vengeance, with something to prove. He threw for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns against Michigan State, completed 84% of his passes for 329 yards and 5 touchdowns against Washington State, 336 yards and 2 touchdowns against Washington, 326 yards and 5 touchdowns in his first interception of the season against Cal, 323 yards and 3 touchdowns, while completing 75% of his passes against Colorado, and completed 76% of his passes for 367 yards and 4 touchdowns, while also rushing for 2 touchdowns on the ground during the regular season finale against Oregon State. The Ducks would once again fall to Arizona during the regular season matchup, 31-24, but would get revenge when they played them in the Pac-12 title game. In their first matchup, the Wildcats were unranked, but this time around they were ranked 8th in the country. Oregon, behind Mariota's 313 passing yards and 5 touchdowns, dismantled Arizona 51-13 to win the conference championship. Oregon would earn a spot in the inaugural college football playoffs, where they took on a Jameis Winston-led Florida State team. Oregon dominated the Seminoles 59-20 behind Marcus's 400 total yards of offense and 3 total touchdowns. Oregon looked like they were going to finally cap off a storybook season behind the arm of their former 2-star recruit, but Ohio State felt differently. Led by third-string quarterback Cardale Jones, the Urban Meyer-coached Buckeyes would beat the Ducks 42-20, ending Marcus Mariota's illustrious college football career. Mariota would finish the 2014 season throwing for 4,454 yards, 42 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, while also rushing for 770 yards and 15 touchdowns on the ground. Being the first Oregon Duck and Hawaiian-born athlete to win the Heisman Trophy, won the Davey O'Brien Award for the nation's best quarterback, and the Walter Camp and Maxwell Award, both being awarded to the nation's best football player, and graduated with this degree at the end of the season, one of the main reasons he chose to return to Oregon for the 2014 season. Mariota would enter the 2015 NFL Draft, where he would be taken 2nd overall by the Tennessee Titans. He has not had the same type of success in the NFL as he did in college, and has spent time with the Titans, Raiders, Falcons, and now Eagles. Mariota also starred in Netflix's Quarterbacks last season alongside Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins. In 2016, Oregon unveiled its 30,000 square foot Marcus Mariota Sports Performance Center. In 2020, the university conducted a poll of alumni and fans via social media, asking them to select 4 Oregon alumni for a notion of Mount Rushmore for the university, and Mariota was one of the top 4 selections, alongside Nike co-founder and university benefactor Phil Knight, Ducks tracks legends Steve Profontaine, and recent graduate basketball superstar Sabrina Ionescu. Marcus Mariota finished his college career throwing for 10,796 yards, 105 touchdowns, and only 14 interceptions. He also rushed for 2,237 yards and 29 touchdowns on the ground. He led Oregon to a 36-5 record and put together a legendary career. With his success and Oregon's cool uniforms, he became the player everyone wanted to be while growing up. While his NFL career may not have panned out as expected, what you can't take away is how legendary Marcus Mariota's college football career was. He is one of the greatest college quarterbacks in the past decade plus. What do you think? Did Marcus Mariota have a legendary college football career? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of my other videos YouTube thinks you will love right here. Don't forget to leave a like and to subscribe for more college football content. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.